first thing that we're going to do is remove the scoots on the sides and the back, and we cut them off the back because it actually exposes the line that you cut down. And this last one on the head's kind of tough to get off. You're going to have to put a little pressure on it. Remove the fins so we don't have to cut around them. Now I'm putting quite a bit of pressure on this to get these diamonds off. But if you hold your knife flat, you're not going to cut into the fish. You hold that knife flat and straight, and they'll come right off without cutting in.
Andy, why do you cut the scoots off?
The reason you cut them off is because when you go to skin it, the scoots will actually push down into the meat when you lay the meat on the table, and then the knife will catch on every one as you're skinning it, and you'll end up cutting through the skin, and that really puts an extra twist on your skinning. So that's how we prepare it. I want to show you this line here that we're going to cut down. Right here, you see this? Where you've got white and then yellow then white. That's the line that we cut down, and I start right here at the dorsal fin. And excuse me, I'm going to start right there, and I'm only going to cut in about 1/4 of an inch just to get my cut started, and I'm going to cut both sides. I'm going to up on that line, and again just going down about 1/4 of an inch. Then I'm going to come back through, and I'm straight down with the knife, absolutely perfectly straight down, and just go 1/4 of an inch at a time, absolutely straight. Once you get down there about 1/2 an inch, you can actually angle that knife a little bit against that center to make sure that you keep going straight down. And eventually what you do is you start hitting the top of the ribs. You can feel the knife going tap, 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 tap on the top of the ribs on both sides. And if you open that up, you can actually see that the ribs start to go out. And so you get it to that point, then with just a little extra pressure, you go right through the rib cage on each side, and you end up like this, where you're opening this thing up and you've separated the ribs on both sides. At this point, I turn it over, cut around the gill plate, poke my knife through, and come right down to the tail and cut that off. Again, going through the ribs. It lays open like that. Then you come back through with your knife and just cut through that little stomach liner. If you hold this thing up to the light, you can actually see that white line there. That's the very, very dead center of the belly. And it's paper thin, and that'll just cut right off like that. And there's your one side. When you flip it over, this side's already started. There's no guesswork flopping around. Where this is actually completely separated here, you just put your knife in there and go right down the back there, and one rib there that didn't cut. You flip that side over, and again just cut through that stomach liner, and your fillet is off. And you didn't cut the head, or you didn't gut it. Everything is there and intact. Rinse the table. I like to keep it clean. Okay, so then you flip this thing over, and right at the where the fin is there, this is where the anal is. You just cut that off, and you cut right down the edge of those diamonds, and you cut that little belly strip off. There's nothing there. By the time you skin each side, you're not wasting any meat. There's just nothing there to save. The same thing here. I'm just going to cut right down that diamond line, right past that fin, get rid of all that. Skin it. We're just going to go through it here like you would any other fish and remove the skin. Now there's some tricks to it. You want to put some pressure on this. I'm pulling on this tail, and I'm putting a lot of pressure on it, and almost as much pressure pulling on the skin as pushing on the knife, and just kind of walk it through there, and it'll come right off of there. Now the way I like to do it is I leave the rib cage on this side because it supports this meat while you're trimming the red meat. If you cut the ribs off first, this will concave, and it makes it very hard to trim that off. And what I'm going to do is pull on this, kind of, straighten it out. I'm going to hold a little bit of pressure on there. I'm using a very flexible knife that bends, and where this bends at the bottom of the curve is where it's going to cut. And I'm going to push down on this. Again, I'm going to keep the knife very flat. If you get it at an angle, you're going to cut into the meat. If you get it up, you're going to pop it up through. But if you keep it very flat and just give it little tiny seesaw little action, and then control right where the deepest part of the bend is, and you can walk that knife right down it and take that whole thing off in a little paper thin strip, and it just goes from red to white on a paper thin strip. And then I'm going to follow that edge, and I'm just going to keep cutting down.
Andy, why do you take the fat off?
The fat has a very strong fishy taste to it, and it just overpowering and just make it really taste fishy. If you get this red off, and you don't have to get every tiny little speck off, but you get the bulk of it off, and it improves the quality of the fish 1,000 times. And then I also cut from the tail to the head. There is a bit of a grain to this meat, and it seems to come off smoother and nicer if you're going from tail to the head. But the last little bit at the tail here, you have to spin it around and get that stuff. The hardest part is the tip of the tail. That red kind of ingrains pretty deep in there. Now this center line, then we're going to wedge this center line out, and I'm going to keep my knife flat. You're not going to cut into it like this. You'll cut into it too deep. Keep your knife, and I mean my handle is actually going to ride against the skin, and I'm going to cut in there at about a 45, and I'm just going to walk it right down like that. And I'm going to turn it over on this side and do the same thing. And then sometimes you got to cut through there a second time, but you wedge that out. And you don't want to cut too deep. You can always go back through and hit it a second time if you don't cut deep enough. But you don't want to cut too deep your first pass and end up wasting a lot of your good, good quality meat. So at this point, I'm going to flip it over and take these ribs off. And I'm going to switch places with you, because I can only cut one way. Again, I'm going to lay that knife as flat as I can, and I'm going to catch right under the rib and just pull it along the rib and just make a couple of lengthy cuts down here. And I'm actually putting a lot of pressure on that knife, and the more pressure I put on it, the shallower it cuts. If you don't put enough pressure on it, it'll either walk into the meat or it'll pop up through. But the more pressure you put on it, it'll actually stay flat. And that's the ribs. And then again, same thing here. I'm just going to walk that down. Trim that off. If it's red, this is the front shoulder where the pectoral fin is, and you want to cut that little chunk of red off. Trim up any of your little bits of remaining stomach liners. This is the fletching off of the dorsal fin, but you end up with a nice fillet here. If you want to hit any last little spots, like you got a little spot like this, the trick is to make that spot the highest spot. So I'm going to put the fish in my hand and I'm going to curl it up and make that spot high. And then I'm just going to shave that right off of there, almost like peeling a potato. And I just shaved that off without gouging or taking any. Same thing here. There's one little spot right there. I'm going to raise that and make that the highest spot in the meat, and just peel it just like you're peeling a potato. That's a pretty clean piece of meat.